And welcome to the Town Council meeting for Monday, July 15, 2024. The mayor and our deputy mayor are both on the road this evening, so I will be pinch hitting for them. If I could actually please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence for the victims of Saturday's shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Please be seated.
Mr. Acting Chair, I'd like to make a motion concerning tonight's agenda.
Please.
I move that we table, let's see here, under old business. Bear with me here, sorry. Under old business, discussion and possible action, the artistic crosswalks, and under new business, item C, the discussion, possible action concerning a tax abatement on the Southstown Highway.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I think that these are both items of significant public interest, and we're kind of shorthanded on the council tonight, missing a third of our group, and I think it makes sense, given the level of interest in these items, that we should defer this a month in the hope that we'll have the full council or a fuller one than we have tonight.
Great. With that, I'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Thank you. With that, we will move on to item 2, public comment. This portion of the meeting is specifically set aside for comments from the public who are asked to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Any person interested in providing public comment remotely should email publicmeetings@rockhillct.gov prior to 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting, at which time a link will be provided to attend the meeting as well as instructions on how to participate. With that, anybody here in the public that would like to speak? Please just state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Heather Taylor. I live at 50 Elm Street, and I'm also the current moderator of Rocky Hill Congregational Church. And I'm here because I know you have an agenda item to vote on possibly installing some bike racks around the center of town, and one of the locations will be at our church. Just want to say we're super excited about that. We're planning a special Bike to Church Sunday and a blessing of the bicycles, so I think it would be a great step to have this area of town a little bit more accessible to bikers. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Alan Smith, 112 Old Main Street. I had a fair amount of other information to give, but I guess that's being tabled. First of all, I'd also like to speak in favor of the bike rack proposal. I think we're looking for ways to activate some of our old town center here, and I think that's just one more way to create a little bit more activity around here. And so I speak in favor of that, and I will hold my comments on the artistic crosswalk for the future. Although I will add just one thing, because I know the policy was put in the meeting packet, so it's something to consider if we're going to wait another month for this. Just to remind everybody, this was first proposed like April 1st, so like we'll be 4 months by then. That what I'd like to see is anywhere in the policy that was proposed to change out just the artistic crosswalk part to public art. I think if we go ahead and just make this a public art policy instead of specifically an artistic crosswalk policy, that will cover future proposals for sculptures or murals or a painted rock or whatever other thing, and I think it could still keep the same framework as proposed in that policy. So just something to consider there if we're going to have another month to consider that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in public? Any correspondence via email, Joanne? Or?
Nope.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, appointments and resignations. Councilor O'Sullivan.
None on this side.
Councilor Prakash.
I don't have any on site.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4, approval of the minutes. Item A, public hearing and town council meeting from June 17, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And item B, budget workshop, May 7th, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
I have to abstain here.
Thank you.
One abstention. I was
Yep,
out.
okay. Okay, with that, we'll move to the subcommittee reports. A, Finance. I'll just take that quickly. The July meeting was canceled. Finance is next scheduled to meet on Thursday, August 8th. Next is Government Operations, which is also me, so just keep right on going. We had a meeting earlier today. We have some updates on the RLE lighting and mechanical package. Maxwell Park lighting has been completed. The high school field lighting fixtures have been replaced, and lighting is on manual control. The automation portion still needs to be installed sometime in August. The lighting has been completed in the community center gym. The boilers in Town Hall have been removed, and new boilers have been put in place by Crane, and that was done last week, or July 5th, maybe the week before. The boiler install will be completed in the next few weeks. During this week, the furnaces and hot water heater at the town garage will be installed, and the Elmridge Field lighting will be done the week of August 5th, and the parking lot and basketball court lighting installation will begin soon thereafter. Let's see, school projects update. There's one school project ongoing that's related to the GMS Science Room renovation. Demolition has been completed, as well as rough electrical and plumbing. New painting has also been done. Counters for labs are on site, and cabinets should arrive next week. Flooring demo and prep is being completed this week, so it's well underway. We also spoke briefly about and put onto the consent agenda the Old Town bike rack proposal, which I think someone mentioned in public comments. And as you'll see in the packet, there's basically, I think, 5 pairs of racks that are going to be installed in various parts of town. I think the only slight change we suggested in the plan was to put 2 sets of racks at Ferry Park, just being the type of ferry that is. Otherwise, we sent to the consent agenda to be pretty much as is, as was brought to us. There's a few updates on other construction projects. The pickleball courts are to be poured later this week. They need to cure for 30 days, upon which time fencing and acrylic additive will be put onto the courts at that point. The Maxwell Park cricket field is projected to begin work in early August, and the Maxwell Park deck hockey and basketball project is slated to be worked on in mid-September. We are next scheduled to meet on Monday, August 19th. I'll move on to item C, public safety.
Sure. I have a brief presentation, like always, so if you want to pull the slides down, thank you. So I'll just start with fire. For fire, the number of incidents went up a little bit, 83 incidents, which also include 13 storm-related events. And the highway incidents were like 3 in count, like this past month. One related item on that is that we are waiting for funding, because it was paused because state process, like in terms of like granting the funds and being handed to us. That process takes a little bit of time. And here it says, like on the report, it says not able to generate money temporarily until 7/1/24. That should be in the pipeline. That update was provided this afternoon by the deputy chief here. Those funds should be, I think, available by next month, we were told. So these updates, normally we get them on Thursday or Friday, and sometimes they are late updates like these. So these slides, I just wanted to make sure, like everybody knows, the audience, that the chiefs provide me these slides, and sometimes that's why they are like updates which are not accounted in these slides because they happen at the last moment. So that's, having said that, like one quick update on the EMD side, which is the emergency management director, who is also our fire chief, Gary. From him, they did a statewide drill, which was election related, for November. And in that drill, there were like several different areas, domains that were simulated, and one of them was cybersecurity, for which our IT department supported them as well. And one thing on that about those kind of drills is that those are ongoing a lot of times, but they take a different context when there's an election year, right? So it is in that context, but these kind of like EMD related drills happen all the time. So this is not out of the ordinary, right? So I just wanted to make sure I underline that piece. Because of the heat, tomorrow's farm event and also the music event, the concert series which the Parks and Rec puts together, that has also been canceled. I hope I'm not taking any breaking news from you.
No, not at all. Keep going.
Okay. So that, and I think that's in interest of public safety. So I think that's probably a lot of people expected that anyway. So moving on to the next slide, which is Rock Hill Ambulance. So Rock Hill Ambulance. So there is a lot of change going on at the Rock Hill Ambulance, and they have a whole new leadership. So I would like to welcome and congratulate the new chief, Mary McGowan, who is going to be leading that organization. And with that, there is also changes down the line in the leadership on the deputy chiefs. Among them, one of them will be Kim Ritchie, who will be the deputy, will be Michael Turcott, and then Zach Marchand. So those three are going to be supporting Mary McGowan. So I wish her all the very best in a new role. And as I told her during the meeting, the Public Safety Committee and the town manager, we all support wholeheartedly the new leadership, and her role is going to be more and more important as we move forward with more work with Aetna, who is our partner. So wish them all the luck and support. Quickly on the data side of things, there's not a lot of things which have changed over from a year-to-year perspective. Nothing big to call out. You will see that on the cardiac arrest side, there it says June there. Really, that data was not available on this side because of all the changes. There was a lot of ID changes as well as the leadership changes with that. So they will be having more data. But we did have some data from on the cardiac arrest side, on the Aetna side. So if you move on to the next slide, you will see that there are 8 cardiac arrests reported on the Aetna side of things. And those are actually a little bit out of line, year-over-year perspective. And we had some conversation about that. It's still just one data point, and it could be heat-related, like extreme heat conditions, which also are kind of correlated. We were told from Charlie Brown from Central Health District that that could be but it's not a direct causal relationship, obviously, and it's one data point. But our town manager pointed that out, and during the meeting as well, that those 8 are a little bit out of the line from a general trend perspective, and we'll keep track of those. On the opioid side of things, which we also like to keep track of, those are 2 events. Those are pretty much in line with what we see year over year during this time of the year from a seasonality perspective. Actually, as a matter of fact, they might be higher in certain years during summertime. So that's the report. Nothing extra which needs extra attention on the Aetna side as well as the RHVA side. Moving on to the next slide, we have PD, and from a PD perspective, everything seems to be in line year over year. And there are some calls for services going down, and there were some things which were discussed in terms of omnipresence or just police activity, right, which have gone down, like in terms of like Councilor Wiener raised that point, like right, and so there was some discussion like from a seasonal perspective, what goes on in PD, from a personnel perspective, what goes on in PD. So I will not go in all the details there, but I will, if you're interested in that, like I would encourage you to watch the meeting. There was some really good discussion brought about by the questions from Councilor Whelan and Chief Klett, very informative. So if public is interested in that from a seasonality perspective, how these things work from a cyclical perspective, and what can we do about those, like filling in those gaps. I think that was a good discussion and to be continued, I think. So I just wanted to call that out. And then there are two items which are ongoing. One is the smash and grab incident which happened in Cumberland Farms, and the golden opportunities. Those are being investigated. 5 search warrants have been issued and they've been executed, I think, if I'm not wrong. Is execution the right word, Councilor Wheeler?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, because he's my PD, expert, so to say. I always look up to him. So, so those have been executed. And the Covey Road, I'm told by the chief, we were told, the committee was told by the chief that we are in the warrant phase of the Covey Road investigation, which was, just to remind you, it was a stray bullet incident. Which happened a few months ago, actually. So that's in the warrant stage. So those are the updates. And the last but not the least, we don't have a slide on this because the Central Connecticut Health District, sent out a PDF. And I just wanted to call out that they talked about the first West Nile virus mosquito, not a human being, but a mosquito was found with that virus, I think in Wethersfield. So I was concerned that it was a human case, but it was not a human case, just to be clear. And they test these mosquitoes for this virus, the West Nile virus. So just be vigilant, being out there, try avoid mosquitoes, have repellents, and then there's extreme heat, obviously, he called out. Last week, Connecticut daily temperatures were in the major to moderate high risk range, according to their standards. So again, like anybody who's gotten out of their house in the last 15 days knows how bad the heat is. So just be cool out there and be safe. So that's the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question. Do we have any cooling stations in town?
Yes, we do have 2 cooling stations, the library and the community center. So that's a great call out. We do have that like always, and they will be open for public. So thank you, Mimi.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item D, senior liaison. I believe they did not have a meeting. Councilor Thoreau, do you have anything to add, or just didn't have a meeting?
There's been no
We're quarterly,
meeting.
so we
Okay,
don't have it for a while.
gotcha, okay. Very good. Land acquisition and farmland preservation.
We're starting to develop guidelines for the community garden at Rocky Hill Farm, anticipating having garden plots for the spring of 2025. So the subcommittee is now developing guidelines on what the rules are going to be, how people are going to be chosen. So in the next couple months, we'll be working on that.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Liaison to the state representative and the state senator. And I will take that. So I do have some updates from both individuals, so I'll get through those as quickly as I can. This is from State Representative Wood. The Hartford Foundation for Public Giving has grant opportunities for our town. All funding must benefit residents of Rocky Hill. Individuals and for-profit businesses are not eligible to apply. The 2024 application process will close on July 31st. Grant awards will range from $250 to a maximum of $10,000. Awarded organization will be required to submit a final report, including fiscal information, upon completion of the project. Grant requests must be used for future projects, not to cover previous expenses. For more information, you can email rockyhillcommunityfund@gmail.com. And then some items that come up from the special session pertinent to our town residents. Preventing a tax increase that would otherwise take effect this fall by continuing to classify commercial vehicles as motor vehicles and clarifying that current law allows municipalities to establish mill rates on motor vehicles that are lower than mill rates on real property and personal property other than motor vehicles. Promoting transparency and competition in municipally administered school construction projects by restoring a ban on construction managers self-performing subcontracting work. Relieving employers, including tax-exempt organizations that kept employees on payroll throughout the pandemic and received the federal employee retention credit from the burden of interest payments attributable to the timing and complexities of a new federal program rather than willfully underpayment by the taxpayer. And lastly, supporting the preservation and redevelopment of historic properties by streamlining the process by which the State Historic Preservation Office reviews those properties. Moving on to, from State Senator Lesser, he first talked about the cooling stations, which was just discussed, but if you do have any other questions, you can, by calling 211 or visiting 211ct.org if you need more information, but then we talked about the two centers in town that will be open. A reminder to the public that driving safety is vital, especially around work zones and traffic stops. On Friday, June 28th, Department of Transportation employee Andrew DiDomenico was killed in a traffic collision by a negligent driver while working on the Wharton Brook connector in Wallingford. His death comes just a month after the death of State Trooper First Class Aaron Pelletier, who was also killed by a driver failing to obey the rules of the road. These deaths reinforce the importance of slowing down, paying attention on the road, moving over for road work and traffic stops, and driving sober. In late June, legislators held a special session at the Capitol to make several minor changes to bills, with the most important one being evaluation regime for car taxes first passed in 2022. The new approach to the car tax utilizes a new model to consider how we value vehicles. While it doesn't increase car taxes across the board, it instead shifts to the manufacturer's to check the retail price of a vehicle, which is more consistent over time. The initial value of a vehicle will start at 85% of MSRP and will utilize a depreciation schedule for a vehicle over time. The impacts this has will change by town and city and by vehicle value, but is intended to add consistency and remove volatility from car taxes. Theft of SNAP benefits is up nationally from criminals preying on some of our most vulnerable neighbors. The good news is, in some cases, stolen SNAP benefits can eventually get replaced. Since the following guidance came out, thefts are down 63% in Connecticut. Instructions on how to change your PIN number are on the DSS website, but the advice DSS is giving is as follows. Avoid using simple PINs. Number combinations such as 1111, 1234, or 9876 may be easy for others to guess. Keep your PIN and card number secret. Do not share your PIN or card number with anyone outside your household. Cover the keypad when you enter your PIN on a card reader. Beware of phishing. DSS and EBT customer service will never call or text to ask for your PIN or card number. Change your PIN often. Change your PIN at least once a month, especially right before your benefits are to be added to your card, by calling EBT customer service at 888-328-2666. And check your EBT account regularly for unauthorized charges. If you see any change, change your PIN right away to stop the thief from making new purchases. And to request the replacement of stolen SNAP benefits, there's a fill out a form at dss-replacementbenefits.ct.gov. And that's the extent of that report. I'll move on to school liaison.
No report for tonight. Thank you.
Capital Improvement Committee has not met. There's no meeting scheduled. I don't think there's anything on the horizon. Or do you know when the next meeting is scheduled, or is there one on the calendar? Or?
It's on the calendar, but I don't recall the
But
exact.
it's not in the
meeting.
near term, so.
No, but we're going to start that up a little earlier this year.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And lastly, item I, Economic Development Subcommittee. The subcommittee met on Tuesday, July 2nd. The lone item on the agenda was an application for a tax abatement related to the property at 1800 Silestein Highway. This was one of the items that was tabled, that was going to be discussed tonight, is tabled until the August Town Council meeting. With that, we'll move on to item 6, consent agenda. And there's one item under there, municipal campus bike rack installation approval. If I could have a motion.
Move to approve?
Did you get a second?
Second, yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
What about some discussion?
It's on the consent agenda. There's
No discussion?
no discussion on it, yeah.
Okay. I abstain then.
Thank you. Moving on, we now have no items left under old business as that was tabled regarding the artistic crosswalks. So we will move to item 8A under new business, Eversource Community Relations presentation. I know we have two folks from Eversource to give us a presentation this evening.
All right, good evening, thank you. We're going to take a moment to make sure that loads up on your machine.
Okay.
Our presentation.
Do you need the screen to come down?
So the audience can see,
Yeah, yeah.
sure. So first off, thank you for having us. I'm Robin Kebernick. I'm one of the Community Relations and Economic Development Managers at Eversource. Victoria Payzone is with me, and she is the Community Relations Specialist that works with the town of Rocky Hill. Some of you may be familiar with Mark Massaro. We moved him to a different assignment. He's still with the department, but he has some additional towns. I'm excited to be here. We've been out touring the state, if you will, talking about some of the challenges we have Eversource is facing. I've been there for a long time, and probably this is some of the most transparency I've seen in the company in a long time. To communicate some of the reasons why the bills are increasing, as well as some of the challenges we've been facing as we look to move our business forward. If you could go to the first slide, if you will, the next slide. This is a very high-level overview, and again, I've been doing this across the state, and you're the first group outside of a first selectman or town manager that we've done it, so the large group of the council is really appreciated, and the broader audience as well. So we do a little bit of an overview of what the industry looks like, and I'll do this very quickly. Generation supply is something that we no longer own. Back in the day, we owned Millstone, we owned several plants. We divested of that when the market went unregulated, so we actually have to procure supply twice a year on behalf of the utilities. The other utilities in the state do the same thing. Whereas a competitive supplier can go into the market at any time when the rates are, or the wholesale market is less, and we procure just those 2 times. It's by state statute, so it isn't always as favorable for us when we go to procure that, but we do not own any generation, and that's why we have to go out and buy supply. The second component is transmission. We do own transmission. That's the high towers that you see traversing. We actually have a substation here on West Street, and those big transmission towers that come out of there actually traverse state lines, and that's the power that gets to flow across the whole region. We do participate in that. Eversource owns transmission. It's regulated at the federal level by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The distribution component is regulated by PURA, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, and that's your poles and wires that come to your homes and businesses that we see on all the streets. And quite frankly, this is where we're facing some challenges. ISO New England oversees that whole bucket across the whole region to make sure that we have enough capacity so that all customers can have electricity. Any questions on that? I'm gonna go super quick because this usually takes me an hour. All right. This is just very high level, demonstrating that Eversource, we have electric, gas, and water companies. The water company's been in the news a whole lot lately. It's Aquarian Water. We acquired it about 4 or 5 years ago, and we're looking to sell it due to the challenging regulatory environment. We had a unfavorable decision on recovering some what we consider to be prudent costs. So now we have it on the market, and one of the regional water authorities has shown some interest lately, and that's why you've seen it in the news. A couple things I'd like to point out here is we have about 4,300 employees in the state of Connecticut that live, work, sleep, play in their communities. So we're very active. I actually live here in Rocky Hill, so I was excited to be able to come talk to all of you. We participate in things that happen within our communities. So we have about 1,700 union employees. They do the yeoman's work, the linemen, the gas mechanics, and whatnot. We also support our communities through volunteerism. We've talked to Ray. There's lots of opportunities when work is being done in a park through a nonprofit. We can get a group of employees together to come help support that. And our employees want to do it in the communities that they live in. So we always encourage that. And then we've donated over $2 million to charitable contributions in 2023, and that's outside of things like United Way. It's what we call community impact grants and things that really help to forward some efforts in communities, supporting things like food pantries. A lot of times food pantries, especially this time of year, really get depleted because nobody's thinking about it, and we can help provide grants that support that, and that's through our shareholders' contribution. Questions on that? Next slide, please. This is just really about our integrated grid and how it's just a challenge when you look at the volume that we have of things like, so the transmission system's one thing. One thing I like to call out is the challenges with the overhead miles of almost 17,000 miles across the state of Connecticut. Pair that with our tree canopy, which is challenging, and we don't own the trees, and neither do you, right? So that's why we have outages. Trees are the #1 cause of outages in the state of Connecticut, one of the most heavily forested states in the country. We also have about 730,000 poles, which was staggering to me. Even though I've been here a long time, I had no idea there were that many. So when you look at the poles, something that we like to make relevant in these conversations is that a pole lasts up to 50 years, barring motor vehicle accidents and whatnot. So to replace a pole, if it was 50 years old, it was probably $5, maybe even less than that. So it's depreciated to perhaps 0. Well, when we go and replace a pole, it adds property tax value. We're usually the #1 or 2 property taxpayer in every town in the state. So that's kind of staggering to a lot of people too. Just based on the volume of poles, wires, and then the infrastructure, it isn't even just a building. It's things like smart switches, fuses, and whatnot. And that all adds to the property tax base. Next slide. My team, our team, the community relations teams works very diligently to work in concert with the communities during storms. It's probably the #1 thing we focus on every single day, trying to make sure that we can forward that narrative. Many of you may be aware that during a heavy-duty storm, like an Asais, we have one company representative assigned to each and every town. That's when it's called a level 4 storm, so it's something very significant. The day-to-day, the thunderstorms, it would be somebody like Vicki or myself. Then we've done a lot of other things. We have managed block roads. After the storms in 2011, block roads were a real pain point in terms of public safety. So we've implemented a number of measures, one of which would be the public safety branch that goes out and focuses just on unblocking those roads, while another group focuses on restoration. Anything on that one? All right, moving right along. The actual bill and the cost of energy. So you see a copy of the bill down here, and again, I mentioned transparency. If you all remember, the bills used to be black and white, and they didn't break out the individual components of the bill. Now we do that so that customers can understand what they're paying for. We also know that it's been very difficult for a lot of customers to pay their bills in the last several years, so we've encouraged people to do third-party supply. I know it kind of flies in the face of what you would think would be, common sense, that why would we want people to have a third-party supplier? Well, it helps you to control your energy costs. A third-party supplier, because they can procure the energy more frequently than us, most usually can offer a lower rate. So unbelievably, in the last 18 months, 30% of our customer base now uses a third-party supplier. So 70% of the people haven't switched. And some of that comes from when the market was originally deregulated, there were some bad actors. And people have heard, you always hear the bad story before the good, so people have been afraid to switch. But there are lots of protections that the regulators and legislators have put in place. So if you use Energize CT as a guideline, those are the ones that have pretty much been vetted out, and you can feel pretty secure that they're a good, safe bet to go with. We've also implemented a low discount rate in the last year, working with the regulators and legislators again, to try to offset some of those heavy burdens on the customers that need it most. Electricity isn't a luxury anymore, it's a necessity. So in order to help those customers pay their bills, that's part of the public benefits charge, but they can get 10 to 50% off, proving that they're able to, that they're challenged in paying those bills. Next slide, please.
What is the average saving on the supply side with a third-party
It
supplier?
varies with the supplier, and it also depends on the time of year. So right now, Eversource's rate is very competitive because it's summer. You could find suppliers that'll offer 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour. Most are between, I'll say, 7 to 11 cents, and that's for residential customers. Business is a whole nother realm. So
So it
again,
can be
looking at
substantial.
Energize CT, you see, it is significant depending on how much you use. But you have to make sure that you're paying attention to it too. Fortunately, if you say you signed for a year contract and it was a year and 2 days, before the guardrails were put in place, excuse me, your rate would go from perhaps 6 cents to 24 cents a kilowatt hour. The guardrails are in place, so that can't happen, and you automatically get reverted over to Eversource's rate. But if you pay attention, I have a sister that watches it like every 6 months, and she is always taking advantage of the lowest rate.
And just for people, listening or watching, how easy it is to switch back and forth.
You have to go on Energize CT, and it has all the outlined right in there for you. And it's much more simple than it used to be.
Okay, good, thank you.
Oh,
That has the comparative rates, correct?
yes,
Yeah.
yep, it's really, they've done the research for you, so that's really good. So the average residential bill up until June of this year looks like the diagram here on the left. So $103 of that is the supply charge. And again, supply, Eversource supply is that number. This doesn't reflect the third-party supply because we're basically talking about Eversource here. And then the $12 in the orange is the public benefits charge. Those two components, $115 of your $204 bill, have absolutely nothing to do with Eversource. It's a pass-through charge. We don't even collect a penny on that. The $29 is the transmission component. That does come to us. The $60 is the delivery charge. That's for the poles and wires running the business and paying the salaries. And then the $11 below has to deal with our investors. Because of the challenging regulatory environment, our Eversource our investors are speaking out, saying it's really difficult to invest in Connecticut anymore. We aren't recovering our costs. So if you're going to go pay $15 for something, and you expected, a rate of return, or let's use the $11, and they're only going to get $5 or $6, they're saying I'm going to go put my money elsewhere. So in the last 3 weeks, Moody's has actually reduced our bond rating, which hasn't happened in a long time. So investors were not as attracted to them. And those of us that play in the investor world know that utility stocks are usually pretty stable and they're a safe bet. So it's been a challenge for us. And of course, borrowing money against money that's already been spent is costing us more. And that's what you see reflected in the next slide. The next slide is as of July 1st. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back one, please. In the next bar graph. As of July 1st, we were able to go to the regulators and say, we have this rate adjustment mechanism that addresses the orange component every year. It's been there for a long time, and it's to recover things like energy efficiency charges or the hardship customer cost recovery. And it's been pretty stable. The last thing we want is volatility in customer bills. The swigs and the swags makes it really hard, even if you use budget billing, right? So what you're looking at now is because supply rate comes down, Eversource's supply rate is less, so it's going to be $63 as opposed to the $103. The $59 is that increase in the public benefits charge. That's to pay for hardship customers that basically we could not disconnect since COVID. So at the beginning of COVID, prudently, governments decided we're not disconnecting customers. The world is all turned on its end. Most states in the country did it for 1, perhaps 2 years. Connecticut is the only state that went to 4 years. So for 4 years, we were not able to recover the costs of paying for the customers that we couldn't disconnect. So that's built into that number, as well as the cost of procuring energy from Millstone. A couple of years ago, there was a proposal to keep Millstone operating, and we were required to purchase power from them. It's been a good thing. I don't want anyone to misunderstand that it's not been a good thing for our customers. But like with anything, sometimes the rate we had to buy in was high, sometimes it's low. So when we make money on that investment, it goes right back to customers. But when the rate goes down and we're not making any money on it, we charge the customers. And that's what's reflected in that $59. I'll pause there because that's where we usually get a lot of questions. Does anybody have any questions about that?
So, the $59, do you go through a process of justifying that number to
The regulators.
to
yeah.
regulators, right? And, I mean, I'm not gonna ask you how you come up with that, but that's,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, no, but the 15, it's basically like, it's 4 years of non-payment, which is created. Did I hear you right? Like, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, so so at some point, right, you would have recovered that amount, right?
So
And
every-
what is the timeline for that?
So every year we go in and we ask to recover those costs and say, this is what, what it looks like. Let's call it, X number of $1 million. And the regulator said, no, we're not going to let you do it this time. So they kept kicking it down, the can down the road, so to speak. And the analogy I like to make here is it's sort of like what we did with the state pension funds, right, wrong, or indifferent, right? We just kind of went like this and kept deferring that. Well, it increased the interest costs and everything else related to it. So we go in and we filed this rate adjustment mechanism, and said, this is roughly the dollar figure we need to recover for hardship. This is the dollar figure for the Millstone plant. And then there's a couple other things in there that are small, and I don't quite remember what they are. We filed it. These are the reasons. They decided it was prudent for us to recover the costs at this point in time. They did reduce our original request a bit. 2 of the commissioners said, yes, let them recover it, and 1 commissioner said no. So fortunately, they let us do it, or we would have kept kicking the can down the road, and that number would continue to increase. Addition to that, we usually ask for that adjustment in May. This time we asked for it in July, so the offset would be that gas supply. Otherwise, you just see that $59 on top of the 103. Does that help?
So is it just 1 month then?
So what's the
Like,
is a
like is this-
sunset? What is the sunset?
10-month recovery period. So the bill will go from 204 in June, on an average 700 kilowatt hour a month bill, to 212 for the next 10 months. And then we have recovered that component. And it should reset back to 12, but you never know.
So when you talk about
Never seen 'em go down.
getting a recovery from non-paying customers, you're not talking about suing the customers who didn't pay you. You're talking about getting approval from the regulators to shift those lost revenues onto the bills of everybody else.
And there's been a lot of news in the media on that, a number of op-ed articles and whatnot as well.
Okay. And you said there was, Connecticut was a bit of an outlier in terms of allowing that post-COVID. Has that changed going forward, or?
Yes,
Okay.
they did put the brakes
They
on that.
capped
I
it.
think was May 22nd was the end of that moratorium on disconnects.
Okay, so
Now
so
we
that's the
can
difference.
disconnect
So that means that Eversource now has that tool back of being able to disconnect non-payers. But that's only single-family residences, though, that in apartments, right, that's a whole separate
All separate.
regulatory regime there. Okay. All right, thank you.
Great questions, thank you.
Does Eversource have the ability to go back after, let's say they got through the pandemic, now they're financially more stable than then, do they have methods to go back and recoup some of the money that they didn't?
So that $12 that we see on the first slide has kind of always been there. And there's a constant recovery for customers that don't pay. It's not the full amount, but it's a percentage thereof, and I don't have those exact numbers. I usually have someone from Revenue Requirements with me. They do have those numbers. But, so that, you usually see it around that $12. It's just that 4-year recovery period, and these 10 months will allow us to get that and then get back into the normal flow of recovery, if you will.
Right, but so if you have, customer A who wasn't able to pay during, say, 3 of those 4 years, whatever, do you have the ability down the road to go back, hey, now that you're back on your feet, to come back to repay some of
We do try to put them
that?
into payment programs and raise aware, we do a ton of outreach, not only to the individual customers, but through social agencies and stuff, just to help them find ways to pay, so that doesn't have to get socialized. So, there are people that are truly down on their luck, and you want to be able to help them, and then there are the bad actors out there that just take advantage of the system. The disconnect process kind of vets that out a little bit more, because,
Yeah.
you know who you're working with, more or less. It's not just a big group of people.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying, because I think maybe this is where Councilor Self is maybe going, it's like, if we, the customers, are going to be the ones who are on kind of using some of our funds to pay for these other people, we like to have the ability for, when possible, to get some of those funds back, for obvious reasons, right? So,
It goes back into rate base, anything that customers start to pay, and it becomes just part of that piece of the pie, if you will. So, taking care of that group that hasn't paid in the last 4 years, there is always going to be people that just consistently don't do that. But once you disconnect them, they
Yeah.
tend to find a way to pay.
So just circling back then to what Eversource's recourse is against the non-payers. So for apartment buildings, they can apply for receivership, as I understand it, correct? Against single-family residences, though, a couple hundred a month for month after month, year after year, that can adds up. Does Eversource, does that have the ability to sue non-payers, or does this regulatory system we have here prevent them from doing that?
So the circumstances can be somewhat unique, so I'll just give you what we usually can do. So now that that moratorium's over, we go to the customer and say, you owe us, we'll call it $100. So you're going to pay your current bill plus $25 a month, or whatever number they come up with, to pay off that $100. so they don't really get away free. And they can apply for those hardship programs or whatever, but we do put them on payment programs so that we try to seek full recovery.
Can you tack on the arrearage and then say, if you miss those payments, then we're gonna disconnect you?
Yes.
Oh, you can. So that's some leverage then, and probably much more cost efficient than suing them.
Right. Yeah, oh my goodness. If we sued everybody,
Well,
your
no,
bills would go up
sure.
even more.
Right. Okay, thank you.
If you are collecting that money back, though, as you want to,
It's an offset going
well,
forward.
what about all the money that we've all paid into this?
Yep,
What
becomes the
happens?
offset. So it's nothing we can hold on to. It has to go back to the customer base.
Okay, thank you.
Do you really think that's gonna happen?
Yeah, that's why we have regulators.
So you're telling me my bill's going down in 10 months?
I'm telling, no.
No.
Nice
Dave.
try, though, yeah.
Let's get her on record.
No, but
yeah.
the $59 won't be there any
Be
longer.
back to 12.
That's right. It'll hopefully go back to the 12. But
So
that
the bill will go down.
$63, which is the summer rate, is gonna become 103 again.
Oh, so I can, in 12 months, my bill will go down? Next summer?
How much energy you're
Next
using.
summer? Well, that always is a factor,
But the
but,
key thing, if I can take you back to that for a quick minute, is that 122, that 115 is not Eversource. We collect the money, our name's on the bill, but anything that is above and beyond those dollar figures have to go back to the customers or the supplier. So the only piece that we make money on is the 89 and the 90.
right, so supply is cheaper during the summer, is what you're telling us, okay? Even though my bill goes up during the summer.
Because you use more.
And again, if that $59 goes down, technically, I
Yes.
should see a little breathing room.
Yes. It'll look more like it did a year ago. Technically.
And how often do people have to reestablish their hardships?
Annually, but there is a consistent outreach to that group of customers almost on a monthly basis because they have to pay the bills. So there's a whole team, our credit team, that looks at those customers, making sure they're paying their arrearages and staying on top of it, because we really don't want to disconnect customers. We want them to be able to pay the bills, and that's why all these other programs are out there to help them.
Why is electricity so expensive in Connecticut?
So, thank you for that, you set me up. That $90 and that $89, that one component is comparable to some of the lowest rates in the country. It's the public benefits charge and some of these extra, you can call them tax burdens, and we're one of only a handful of utilities in the country that are required to collect that. It's public policy. And that's where I'm saying we've been transparent. It's been there for decades, and the public just didn't really know about it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? A little more detail, what you're referring to there?
So it's the public benefits component and, those additional pieces of it. So if you looked at energy efficiency, because there is a piece of energy efficiency in there, other utilities have stepped away from collecting that and said, let it become a private entity. We have the #1 programs in the country for energy efficiency, and it's decreased our load and all kinds of other good reasons why it is prudent, at least in my opinion, that we do that. Similar with the public benefits charges. They don't put into rate pay some of this hardship recovery. They don't put in things like a millstone contract. They would put that perhaps on your taxes, because it really doesn't have anything to do with Eversource itself.
So part of this then, if it wasn't showing in your Eversource bill, the way it's structured in some other states might be, it shows up on your tax bill, portions of it?
It wouldn't show up on your utility bill at all.
Right. Okay.
So people that have homes in Florida and stuff, you can make the comparison. It's like right in your face.
So in essence, the public benefits portion of the bill, it's called public benefits, but it's actually potentially bailing out Eversource because it's making up for collections that Eversource couldn't get. Am I reading that right?
So if people are using the energy, we should be paid for it.
You should.
And when they don't pay for it, it's a mechanism to go back and get it. The key thing is like the disconnect component. Other utilities can disconnect at any time and aren't beholden to when they can and can't.
But the 4-year program you mentioned that Connecticut has that other states don't, was that an Eversource decision or was that the state
It was a
government decision?
combination of the legislators and the regulators.
So it's kind of out of Eversource's control at that.
Well, we've been petitioning each year to kind of recover those costs a number of time each year.
No, but I mean like making it 4 years instead of a shorter period like other states have done.
We started asking when everybody else did.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I guess
know,
it's
the
more
hardship component-
transparency, I mean, I
The
suppose.
hardship component gets tricky because it is, you don't want people not to have electricity either, right? So it's a difficult message.
Can I make a suggestion? On your presentation, you should make a bill like you should put another graphic similar to your median bill in the country. Like pick a state which is middle of the pack.
Compare it to another.
Yeah, I think I would love to see that.
That's
like
great
how this
feedback.
breaks down.
That's great feedback.
Just
Yeah.
it's
Well, it is-
context is benchmarking, right?
Most customers pay their bill to Eversource and they don't understand that basically 50% we don't make a profit on. And the other side of it, when you compare it, I mean, Ray heard me say this is my personal little thing that I kind of introduce, and it isn't necessarily an Eversource thing, but because I was in customer communications and whatnot, when you look at $90, right, and you say that's what I'm paying every month, think about the value of what you get for that. None of us stop to think that, my house at one point had 6 cell phones. My cell phone bill was exponentially higher than my electric bill. Yet they don't work if they don't have electricity. Just about everything you use costs the price of a Starbucks, I don't drink them, my kids do, grand latte, $6, $7 a day. And you wake up to a hot shower. You can cook, you can make your own coffee, you can bake your breakfast, your heat goes on. All these different things that are our creature comforts we've come to rely on for $90 a month. Your entertainment bill, your internet and everything is probably even higher than that, but none of that will work without this product.
That's why it's a utility, right? I mean, but yeah, I would love to see that because, I just feel like that's the missing component because if you had the bar chart, it's just an easier,
That's great.
synthesis.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I'm glad we're with your group, because as we start to continue to roll this out beyond the municipalities and the legislators to consumers, it'll be resonate with them better. Thank you.
So for a customer that has a reseller, their supply charge would be different,
Yes,
but the rest of it, because even with the reseller, Eversource has to transmit it, and public benefits and delivery would still be, that's all Eversource. So it's just that one component
nope,
that
the
would be different.
$59 isn't Eversource either, true. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
But
The
that,
way
that stays
Yes.
regardless. That's
Yep,
what
that
I meant on the
$12
bill. It
piece.
stays anyway.
Yeah, all of that will stay, it's just different breakouts, if you will.
But only
Some
for 10
people
months.
get confused when they see all this other stuff on the bill. It's just
Check
that
it.
one component
Check
that
going away.
could be
Check that
possibly
bill.
lower.
And the supply piece you can control if you use the market.
And with that, we're competing with other companies. So if there's a bigger market, let's say in Detroit or something like that, they could go there rather than to us, because they can bid lower
Yep,
perhaps.
absolutely.
So the supply cost is based on Eversource's supply cost, not the second the
Correct.
reseller, okay?
Yes.
So the resellers, when they give you a 12-month contract, they're obviously taking the number, dividing it by 12, so it will look good in the winter, but may not look good in the summer.
Just based on.
Because you're
your
on a
consumption.
contract, right? Per year, you're going to be X amount per kilowatt. So by definition, from what I'm seeing or hearing, I should say, is that the cost for that contract will be a deal in the winter, but will not be a deal in the summer.
It depends on what you're paying. Like I said, my sister kind of looks at
Sure,
it every
yeah.
6 months. So sometimes the Eversource rate is more favorable, and she'll switch back to Eversource. If she can get it a better price with a supplier, she'll do
Okay.
that.
I heard, Ray, I think you wanted to come back next May to see if the $59 went to 12?
I think Jeff might have said that.
Sounds like something I would say, doesn't it?
All right, do you want to continue to move on?
Yes.
Are we good with this one for now?
That horse is
Okay.
dead.
So part of this, we bring it around to what we've made for investments, right? So that's that delivery cost component. $1.6 billion in 2023. You see the pie chart here. The electric distribution piece was $680 million. That's for things like when we see the major pole replacement projects, we're replacing poles and wires. We're putting what we call smart switches, trip savers, all of that in there. All of those are taxable in each community. So if you look at it from the state perspective, over $500 million went back into the state coffers based on the taxes we pay on our infrastructure. And it's broken out just in those 3 different categories, in addition to what our employees contribute. We all pay, you know, our own taxes, and then especially during storms, you know, indirect back to restaurants and contractors and suppliers and things like that. So this is just kind of saying some of our contribution back to the state. Next slide.
That's a stretch.
What does it mean to Rocky Hill? So this is Rocky Hill's property taxes in the green on the top, the blue on the bottom, and you just see over year, 2019 to 2023, that investment has continued to increase due to the work we've been doing on reliability improvements and whatnot. And then the assessed value, as you see, is up almost $6 million. So, you know, we continue to invest in the communities to try to reduce outages and whatnot. And this is some of where we're concerned, because we aren't being allowed what we consider to be prudent recovery of those costs. So that challenge has forced us, if you will, into a position where we've reduced our capital spending by $500 million over the next 5 years. So $100 million a year. So that's impacting the slide that you saw earlier. So we aren't going to be able to do some of these reliability projects that are what we would consider proactive, that are really system enhancements to mitigate any future issues on the system, as opposed to when it breaks, you fix it. We're trying to foresee and have a more reliable system as more and more electrification and clean energy get on a grid that's very, very old. So the good news for Rocky Hill is we've been doing the investment here. You see it reflected in the property taxes. But unfortunately, as we have to back away from those capital improvements, there's the potential that this could stabilize or even decrease.
That's interesting. What do we compare to other sister towns if we're $26 million of assessed value?
So again, it's a plethora of different reasons.
Right, because that's like a punkage question, yeah.
So, we do have West Street Substation, so that's a significant, every time we do something in there, it increases the property value, right? So you're a little bit ahead of probably similar communities. Again, I've done like 50 some odd of these, so all but one town has seen a steady increase. A few of the towns had mill rate reductions so that it didn't really increase, but it was the assessed value and stuff that changed. So based on, you know, the current vision of the company, it's been steadily increasing in the last 5 to 10 years. And that's the trajectory we wanted to keep it on, because that's what reduces outages and allows for, you know, us to continue to use more and more electricity.
So the cuts in capital improvement are going to play a significant role in that, because we're going to have depreciation not offset by capital improvement.
Correct. Any other questions on this one? All right, next slide. This is all happening as we want a clean energy future, right? So electric vehicles, electrification, gas, natural gas has kind of become a dirty word. So we see a lot of large corporate customers, their investors want them to have clean energy. They're pulling you know, gas using rooftop units before end of life and putting in electric. Well, the grid wasn't built to take on all that additional load. And if you remember, I don't know, was it 6 weeks ago or so, all that was in the media was that electric vehicle program that, you know, we're extremely supportive of. We've put over $40 million into charging stations and whatnot. I personally have been close to electric vehicles since the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's amazing to see the growth there, but the growth comes at the expense of the infrastructure. And if you're not putting the infrastructure out there, you're not going to be able to charge. And that's kind of, in very short synopsis, what happened here in the state. Very laudable goals, great targets, but nobody really thought about how the infrastructure can't support the rollout of electric vehicles that quickly. So we would have had to put 22 to 28 substations in where nobody wants us to even put a pole in their yard. So the challenges you can well imagine. And you know, everybody has a different tipping point, but it just couldn't happen as quickly as we had hoped in the state, and it's across the country. So this is all happening in a growth region, an area that has seen no growth in over a decade, due to energy efficiency. Some of it is just lack of business development because of the cost of doing business in many of the surrounding states and in New England. It's some of the highest in the country, as you all well know. So that's why the growth has been relatively flat. Well, what we're seeing here is ISO New England is expecting everything to triple or double by 2050. And we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So again, you go back to those infrastructure improvements for reliability, capacity, and whatnot. All that has to happen to really get to a clean energy future. Any questions on that particular piece?
Comment, it's not painting a pretty future, picture for the future. I mean, because we're going to have more need for it, and we're putting less money in.
And that's part of the,
And that's just so we can keep our bills manageable today. So we were kicking the can down the road on some other stuff. Okay.
that's very insightful. Next slide, please. So this slide troubles me a little bit, and you can probably imagine why. This is an average house, right? Well, who do we know that has 2 electric vehicles using 400 kW each, right? That's a little high for an electric vehicle, but customers that are having trouble paying for 700 kilowatt hours can't put gas in, so they're going to install a high-efficiency electric AC unit, reduce their consumption by 100 kW, but they're going to add those 2 electric vehicles. 1,400 kilowatt hours a month. Never mind the fact that they had oil, they can't convert to natural gas, so they're going to put an electric heat pump in, adding another 1,000 kW. You're at 2,400 kWh for people that didn't even want to pay for $200 of 700 kWh. So you can see some of the challenges here as consumers want to move in that direction. Not only can the infrastructure not support it, but the current rate making doesn't allow for it either. Next slide. Our neighbors in Massachusetts have been really working on this, and we like to use Massachusetts as an example because they're in our footprint. And the key messaging here is just collaboration. You know, utilities by themselves aren't going to change things. Regulators, legislators by themselves aren't going to be able to change things for a real clean energy, efficient, and cost-effective future. So in Massachusetts, several months ago, they put a group of people together. They were legislators, they were municipalities, manufacturers of equipment, individual consumers, large data centers or Amazons of the world. And they sat everybody down and said, how do we get to a clean energy future by investing prudently in infrastructure to get us there? So when you look at the bar charts on the left, I'm going to kind of pivot back to that. You look at Connecticut and Massachusetts over the last 5 years. And they were pretty comparable. If you look at Massachusetts, we're similar but different. And the investments we made were very close. The regulatory environment there was somewhat challenging. 52 is the 50 states, District of Columbia, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that governs transmission. So Mass was 36 out of 52, Connecticut's 43 out of 52. Challenging, but we were able to dialogue. We can't really dialogue right now. We're bringing ideas up to try to collaborate and, again, just kind of kicking the can down the road. We aren't really getting heard. So that's why you see, as Eversource, we're not going to invest that $500 million in Connecticut from 24 to 28. They're investing it in Massachusetts because there's a path forward collectively. Everybody's kind of on the same page. And what I find that from where I sit that's unique about it is they're meeting not just once or twice here and there. They meet regularly. Anyone of that committee can call and say, hey, I've got some great ideas. They start to share. So it's just a lot of cross-collaboration, and some of the outputs which you can find in Massachusetts on some of their dockets and whatnot that are public information, you can just see how transformative it's been there. And their numbers have increased. Their regulatory environment is much more favorable. The governor's along for, with an understanding. And it's, again, just kind of talking it all through. Whereas in Connecticut, we kind of went the opposite way. And, pretty much we can be number one in the most challenging environment at any point in time. And again, it's difficult to work in that environment, and we just want to have conversations. We don't want just some sort of edict to come out and not have been part of the conversation. In Massachusetts, you see all those different elements that get you to the clean energy future. One that's important to note in my mind is advanced metering. And you say, what's advanced metering? Well, today, most of our customers think we have this huge board, and it says, this customer's out, and this customer's out, and it's because of this piece of equipment. Well, we do have some pretty fancy stuff, but it's not quite that advanced. With advanced metering, we'll know you're out of power probably before you do. And there will be that board that allows us to address the core issue more quickly than we can today. We won't be rolling trucks for a branch. You know, the system will allow us to have that branch just kind of fall out by giving it an extra jolt or something. I don't know all the semantics of that, but that's how it was kind of explained to me. The other piece of advanced metering infrastructure is the ability to have enhanced rate making. So like my kids always say, oh, I want to buy, you know, a smart washer and dryer, so I can turn it on from bed at night and use, you know, and power should be cheaper then. Well, in our current environment, it isn't necessarily so. You can't take advantage of that kind of rate without advanced metering, because the meters just can't handle that the way they're constructed today. So to be able to move that forward would be great. We started conversations with the regulators and legislators on that front in about 2019, and it just hasn't moved forward. They very much want that to happen, but they don't want to have us get compensated for it. So if we're gonna spend $800 million, we want at least a portion of that back, because then we don't have to, you know, then that would be passed on to you, and it'll help all of our energy futures. Any questions on the Massachusetts-Connecticut
Yeah,
component?
can you give a couple of specific examples of the regulatory changes in Massachusetts that greatly advanced your investment during these coming years that we do not have in Connecticut?
That whole pie chart, that $1.3 billion is all going to be recoverable over a period of time, that 4-year period.
Okay, so advanced metering you talked about.
Solar.
So, okay.
Distributed energy resources,
And it's
electric
convincing,
vehicles.
and it's convincing the regulators to allow that to be added on to the customer's bills? Is that what it comes down to?
In a prudent and, you know, thoughtful manner. We're still accountable to the regulators there, and we have to say, this is what we want to spend, and this is why. You know, we can't just go out and spend $87 million on EVs without them knowing why, how. You know, like the $40 million we spent in Connecticut over a period of time allowed for EV chargers to be installed in municipalities, libraries, because we paid for the cost to get the infrastructure there, which is probably most significant. And then the town or whatever would pay for the unit itself. You know, it could cost $60,000, $80,000. So we charge the customers, socialized, a little bit of that, but we also pay some of it out of our own pocket because we want to forward the clean energy future.
But the challenge politically, I guess, is as in Massachusetts, they had to sell the customers on the benefits of seeing their bill, because their bills are going to go up to pay for these things you're talking about. So that's the trade-off we're discussing here.
So they've created policy that will allow for that growth.
Okay, thank you.
So about the advanced metering, because if I have the time, you and I spoke earlier, I have the time of day rate, so that's an advanced meter, right? So, if I can make a comment / suggestion or feedback, the time of day rate that is offered, the discount for doing off-peak electricity versus the premium is very little compared to the premium you're charged on peak, and I think there should be more of an incentive, because it almost doesn't pay to do it, because you might as well just stay on the same rate for all 24 hours. It really should be much more of an incentive to use your utilities off hours if they really want you to do that.
Yep, and with advanced metering, we can do that, because you have a very specific meter that most customers don't.
No, but
Especially in the residential.
but besides the meter, but I'm talking about the rates they charge, even if you have the meter.
Yep.
That the discount is small compared to what they hit you with if you use it during the prime time, where it should be a bigger discount. It should be more of an incentive to do it, because basically you could almost make the argument never to do the time of day rate, unless you, like I happen to have the scenario where I can do it and I save a little, but you don't save a lot. But most people, you figure out it's not even close to worth doing, because they don't really make it worth your while to do it. And I'd encourage them to relook at what those rates are if they really are serious about people trying to spread the use of electricity to off-peak hours, because right now it's just not economically doesn't make sense.
And that curve gets us every time,
Yeah.
right? Because the capacity to be able to serve that load,
Right.
you know, in the nighttime is much.
Yeah, if you want people to use their clothes dryer at 2 a.m., well, you can't only give me, half a cent off, and then bang me, 3 cents more during peak. You got to make it where it's really worth their while.
And that's been a challenge. I mean, we've done time of day on and off in different capacities for years. And again, working with the regulators and legislators on something that's prudent, that the cost burden isn't necessarily shifted to those customers that don't have the time of day rate. So advanced metering makes it much cleaner, if you will, to do that kind of rate making.
Yep.
So, and the cost is less significant overall. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, that basically, I think the last one is just discussion. And does anybody have any other questions about any of this? And any thoughts on, we've been to most of the municipalities, we started to talk to some of the chambers. Our government affairs team has reached out to several of the legislators. But how else should we be getting this information out there so customers kind of can understand what they're paying for?
Can I ask one question, piggybacking on Councilor O'Sullivan? The mass, like this, and Punkage to some extent, I would love to see like a Mass bill versus a Connecticut bill, because you must have higher costs for the supply part, or somebody's paying for that infrastructure.
The
Or you're
supply-
recouping some of the money for the infrastructure.
We are recovering some of the money for the infrastructure, absolutely, and that's outside of supply. So supply is procurement of the generation.
Yeah.
The delivery component is the infrastructure. So,
Some of the, like solar, that's not addressing supply?
not really. It's a different bucket, if you will.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a different bucket.
all right.
So, at the higher level, the ISO New England level, most definitely, because using solar is an offset to the delivery system, if you will. But there are challenges there too, if you go and read about some of the other parts of the country and how that kind of topsy-turvied over time. And they implemented surcharges to customers that went solar because they still are using the distribution system in one capacity or other, and it was perceived that they weren't paying for it. So again, this whole energy space is just evolving as each new thing comes on, right? And I'm sure there are things out there none of us have even thought of that'll change it even more so going forward.
So like, does Massachusetts have a surcharge for the infrastructure or something?
They haven't, they're still in this working group. They have the initial outlay. They have a plan, and I'm not gonna get the name right. It's an acronym that you could look up. Electric Supply.
I was just more curious. I mean, like,
It
to
isn't
build,
that obvious
why aren't we
yet.
going in that direction?
Right.
There has to be some reason.
Yeah, it isn't in rate base 100% yet, because they just started with 2024. But look out a year or two.
So part of that $500 million cut was also, like, I do know some of the subcontractors for Eversource were just discontinued, they severed the contracts, at least for now, and that was a big hit to some of the workers in Connecticut. I'm very familiar with that, yeah.
Got friends that were impacted.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and when you kind of bring it down to the tree thing, which is just always in our minds, we do a 4-year tree cycle program, so that every 4 years, every community, we look at the most heavy hit areas within a town and get out there and trim on our backbone.
Yeah.
And when Ray would call and he'd say, oh my gosh, we have 2 trees on Elm Street, they have ash borer, they're gonna die, they're under the power lines, can you come do them outside of that trim? Most usually we would say, absolutely. We send our arborists out, they double check it, and we cut them. Well, those are the kind of things that now, we still wanna hear about them, but it's unlikely we're gonna have the resources to go.
Because that's part of that $500 million.
Yes.
That's huge. Okay.
Great questions.
I think Massachusetts has more wind turbine, so they have more renewable energy sources than we do right now. I know they have more of those.
New York is what you want to look at. So New York, we don't focus on New York because it's outside our portfolio, but if you wanted to, geek out a little bit and really see where it's gone from here to here, New York is a great case study. And a lot of it is because the offshore wind. We haven't been able to, we have offshore wind, but Connecticut isn't able to take that in yet.
Yeah.
I'm on a project with transmission that is going to get there. All right, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate it. Thank you, Ray, for inviting us. And if you have any questions after the fact, Vicki and I are around, or you can contact us individually. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to new business item B, Affordable Housing Commission CHFA presentation.
Good evening. My name is Vinan Gala. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Committee. Part of the, it's a brand new committee, as you would know. So part of our initial work has involved liaisoning with CHFA to understand, what kind of programs they have and how we can benefit from their knowledge of doing this for such a long time. So so today we have Vincent Burgeon and Rob Michalik here, who's going to walk us through a brief presentation. podium's yours. Thank you.
Good evening, Rob Michalik, Director of Government Relations for CHFA.
And Vincent Bergen, Senior Business Development Officer at CHFA.
So we're going to just very quickly run through a fairly brief presentation just to give you a sense of who we are at CHFA, what we do, and the like. Feel free to interrupt us at any time. We have some, obviously at the end if you have any questions. It's very high level. Vin and I are not the experts on everything that we do at CHFA, so if you have any real detailed question or want to dive in, we're happy to kind of bring somebody back or set you up with some subject matter experts within our organization. But just very quickly, CHFA, located on 999 West Street here in Rocky Hill, is the state's housing finance agency. So every state in the country has at least one HFA, and we are the one for Connecticut. And our overall mission is essentially to alleviate the shortage of affordable housing here in the state, and we do that in a couple different ways. The first is by providing financing for multifamily affordable housing, and also through the provision of resources for folks to own, buy homes. We are a quasi-public agency, so we're not a typical state agency. We're set up in state statute, and we have a public mission, but we are not part of the executive branch. We're not the Department of Housing. We're not DECD or something like that. We're set up kind of outside of the control of the typical government mechanisms in order for us to be a little bit more flexible than they are and to act a little bit more like a business would. And as such, we don't rely on state appropriations for our operations. In short, we have the ability and authority through the state and federal government to issue tax-exempt bonds. And so we essentially keep the lights on by the spread that we realize from what we have to pay bondholders versus what we can bring in from folks who have loans through us. So that's pretty much how we kind of keep the lights on. So as I mentioned, one of the ways we address the affordable housing situation here in Connecticut is through home ownership resources. So I'm just going to go quickly through this because I think you're probably a little bit more concerned about kind of the multifamily affordable housing side of things. So we provide various resources for residents to kind of own and purchase homes. Primarily, we offer below market interest rates on home mortgages. Typically, our rates are anywhere from 1/4 to 3/4% lower than what you can find in the market. We also provide prospective home buyers with down payment and closing cost assistance, and then we offer various home buyer education programs through sponsors that we provide funding for. So if you're looking to buy a home, we'll provide you some information of what you need to do to kind of get ready to purchase a home, and then kind of once you're a homeowner, what exactly you should expect as a homeowner. Because we have that tax-exempt bonding authority, there are certain restrictions that we must require of various folks who would come to us looking for assistance. And for the most part, when it comes to our home ownership programs, they are restricted to first-time home buyers and income-qualified home buyers. So generally speaking, the income that we allow borrowers to have is somewhere around 120% of the area median income or below. And there are also various housing price limits, so we're not going to kind of subsidize people to buy mansions and the like. So, for example, in Rocky Hill, if you're talking about a family of one, the limit would be around $122,000 in income versus a family of four of about $140,000, give or take, in income, and the home price limit here is about $510,000. So kind of the other side of the shop for us is the multifamily side. So again, we provide resources for the creation, acquisition, and preservation of rental units. We provide financing to private developers to create new affordable units, to acquire, convert non-affordable units into affordable units, and to preserve existing affordable unit housing stock. We have various programs to do that. We're going to focus on a couple that are listed in the slide here, one being the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, and the other being a new program that we have, Build for CT. And again, kind of like on the home ownership side, there are certain restrictions that we have with the money that we provide. And again, it's typically there are reservations that are required for income qualified tenants, and generally the limitations are what we're kind of looking for are people between the limitations typically are 50% of area median income and 80% of area median income. And again, just to give you kind of an idea of what that might mean for Rocky Hill, what is 50% area median income for a family of one? It's about $42,650. Family of four, a little shy of $61,000. At 80%, you're talking $68,000 to about $97,500. And these are just a few occupations that tend to be associated with those general income levels. So they're, folks ranging from bus drivers to firefighters to accountants and the like. And so every few years, we conduct a housing needs assessment, drawing on public and private data to kind of get a general sense of what the market is like in Connecticut, where there are gaps and such. And so what we're seeing statewide and also kind of here in Rocky Hill is that there are a shortage of units kind of available for very low income individuals. And then also there's a shortage of units for folks at the kind of higher end of the income spectrum, that would have the amenities and such that they would like. And so what unfortunately has happened, there's kind of a vice-like effect, is that people in that kind of middle income range are being squeezed, as folks are kind of lower income folks are having to buy up, and folks who are at higher incomes are perhaps buying down a little bit. And that's exacerbated by various other statewide trends. For instance, as you all know, if you go out and look to buy a house, there's not a lot of inventory out there. It's very difficult to find a house to buy, which is driving up kind of home sale prices. And that is what's even more challenging is that we're in a very high interest rate environment, right? So it's more difficult to buy a house. It costs more to buy a house. And then folks who are in homes currently who have mortgages at low interest rates are not going to leave their houses to go somewhere else, because when they have to finance the new purchase, they're going to have to realize much higher interest rate to do so. So that's creating a number of challenges here in the state and across the country for that matter. And then here, because there's not homes for people to move, there's not a lot of vacancy for rental units. So what you're seeing is obviously an increase in rental rates. So with that, it's you, Ben.
The first program I want to talk about is a low-income housing tax credit overview. That program began in the Tax Reform Act of 1986. It's run through the United States government, Treasury Department, and the Internal Revenue Code. This is where tax credits are allocated across the country based on your population. These credits were really one of the first programs that involved the public-private partnership, where you have companies like Eversource or the banks, where they would take and purchase these tax credits in order to realize the benefits on the tax side. The funds that were then raised as a result of the sale of those tax credits contribute to filling the gap on the development side. So to develop these low-income developments and to be able to have the housing that we want for them, it's subsidized through those tax credits, and that's where the private side is investing, and that money is coming in to fill the gap between what equity is being put in by the developer and what financing can provide in itself. So that program's been around now for nearly 40 years, and it's been very successful in developing 31,000 units in the state of Connecticut and 3.85 million nationwide. And I think the other thing is we brought some pictures just to sort of give people a sense of what these units look like. I mean, it's, I think, surprising to some who don't really focus on this. When we talk about affordable housing and we're talking about the tax credit programs, we're talking about lower income in the 30% AMI levels, and 50% AMI levels. And while these units are predominantly that, they're also a mix of others with higher AMI levels. So the model has really become more of a mixed income development as opposed to everyone's in a low income development neighborhood. And I think as you look at the pictures, the quality and the characterization of what people are getting is just like market rate in many cases, just as well as market rate. We want to provide pride of ownership, pride of living where you are, and not looking at this as a subsidy that makes you feel less than your neighbors. And it's also built to last. We have one in Berlin. We have another one Lascano Homes, Orange, Connecticut. Again, if you look at the unit styles, again, some of this is new construction, and then also there's the money and funds being used to preserve units that exist and that you want to maintain in the housing stock.
So if I may, you're helping to develop those by financing those projects, not by owning them, by
Oh, right,
helping
we do not own
below
them. We
market
have- we have
interest rates to
developers who-
investors.
Correct, yep.
Yeah, so
Somehow-
essentially, we provide financing to private developers who develop these, and in return for that financing, because it's fairly generous in some cases, particularly with these tax credit programs, there are certain things that they have to do, which is restrict some of the units to certain income levels and maintain that restriction typically for 40 years or so.
And it's for-profits and nonprofits, depends on who's investing and who's developing in those marketplaces. Build for CT.
Can I interrupt you there? You just said something that raised a question. So when you're talking about offering tax credits, that doesn't provide a benefit to nonprofits. Are these tax credits, is there a secondary market for these tax credits?
Yes,
There is,
yes,
okay, thank you.
the tax credits are being sold out to then raise equity essentially to help build the project. The Build for CT. Build for CT is a new program that just began last year. It was initiated as part of the governor's biennium budget, where they put $200 million. Well, initially, it's $800 million of funds that was designated to the Department of Housing. Again, this is a very unique private-public partnership. 200 of the 800 million was designated for a multifamily program, which was, the goal of the program was twofold. The governor was hearing many instances in where towns and municipalities and large employers were concerned about the number of available units to attract people to the state and to fill the positions. Particularly, you see and hear about it more in the southeastern part of the state with what's going on with electric boat and the thousands of jobs they're looking to hire over the coming years, as well as just across the state, there's just a need for more housing, as we talked about. With the interest rate increases over the last couple of years, the increased costs, it's really created a big gap in these development capital stacks. So where they were conceived 5, 6, 7 years ago, developers were expecting certain costs, you budget these costs, including your interest rates, all those costs have gone up. And so you were seeing a lot of deals on the sidelines, particularly market rate deals that weren't getting built because they just didn't make economic sense. And so this program is a Department of Housing program. CHFA is facilitating the program on behalf of the Department of Housing, and the goal here is to help get these developments built, and then in turn provide more market rate housing, predominantly market rate housing, and then provide a subsidy for restricting a minimum of 20% of those units to workforce housing levels. And those are between those families making between 60 and 120% of area median income. And so that it provides that extra incentive to develop that property and to move forward and to hopefully build more units so that we can help increase the supply, which will help sort of put a cap on the rent increases that we're seeing. So it's a combination of getting more units in the market, more supply, which will help serve the demand, help deal with some of the affordability crisis on the high end that we are talking about for those who can afford to live in higher-end apartments, those making more than 80% of area median income, and giving more supply, but then also creating for 20% or more of those units being affordable to 60 to 120%. So that program is really brand new. We have one example. The first loan we closed was Kelson Row around the corner here. That's a loan that was financed by Liberty Bank. And that included, as you guys, I'm sure well know or perhaps know, is that was 10% inclusionary zoning, which 10% of the units were affordable to folks making 80% of area median income. As our restrictions were imposed, we funded some money towards that in the form of a subordinate loan, and we doubled the amount of affordability, but we restricted them at 100% area median income. So again, we're not looking to just provide subsidy towards a lower income level. If the market rents justify it, we will restrict the units at a higher AMI, so that as long as those market rents are high enough and it provides a discount from market to the tenants, we'll restrict the levels at even somewhere between 60 and 120% of AMI. And what's really important is that every unit that we restrict under the program will count towards the town's 10% goal. So there's the goal for those who have not reached the 10% goal and who understand the importance of, or the concerns surrounding 830G projects. This helps further that goal of getting to 10%. And so every unit, regardless of what AMI level, where normally you'll see yourselves restricting units at 80% to sort of qualify under DOH guidelines, DOH will accept every unit that we restrict under the program towards your 10% goal.
So by the way, on those units, for example, Kelson Row, right? The subsidy, the tenants need to make, 80% or 100% of AMI, you said.
For the ones that you restricted, it's 80% AMI or less.
Yeah.
For the units that we're restricting, it would be 100% AMI.
Okay, and they're getting a below market rent then on top of it.
They'll get a below market rent.
And what's the definition of below market? Is there a percentage?
It isn't. What we do is if the program will charge a rate of 1% to 3% on the subordinate loan, and depending on how big of a discount we're getting for those rents from market based on a recent appraisal, I'll charge between 1% and 3% on the subordinate loan. The bigger the discount that they're giving the tenant as a result of those restricted rent levels, the lower the interest rate I'll put on the subordinate loan.
So your measure will be the other rents in that project?
Well, it'll be the appraisal, because at this point, you're under construction, so you don't
Yeah.
have units. And really, you're just modeling this, because you don't really know
Sure.
what the future will hold, both on market rents as well as the AMI levels.
And not to pin you down, but would you say it's like 80% of market rent?
I would say that when I'm doing a typical deal of about 2% on an interest rate, I'm targeting to get around 15% discount from market on a weighted average
85
basis.
is, okay.
Across the different styles. I try to keep it so that if you're 50% one bedrooms, 50% two bedrooms, our goal would be to try to restrict a portion. If we're restricting 20%, it would be equally weighted, but not always. And again, I'm trying to make sure we're giving these tenants a benefit for what we're giving.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
If it was today's rates, what would affordable housing range be in Rocky Hill, if you have an estimate, and what would be low-income housing in Rocky Hill?
I would have to get back to you when it comes to the specifics of how that would impact. Each project's going to be different, but on the AMI levels, I can send you a table that we can share that will show you when you plug in the AMI levels, and we can do that. It'll tell you what the maximum rent is for a studio, what the maximum rent is for a one-bedroom at the different AMI levels. We also publish it on the Build for CT website, which is linked to the Chaffa site. It's a new website, so it's evolving, but that is something that's going to be up and is up, and will be something that the owners can track. So when they're leasing tenants, they'll have real-time understanding of where the AMI is and what the max rents are.
If you could send that, I think that would be something I might be interested in.
Sure, happy to do that.
Thank you.
So I just to be sure that I heard you correctly, but did I hear you say that a typical savings for the tenant would be about 15% off market rents?
On a 2% loan. When I can,
2%
that's
loan.
my target, right? I don't have it's not defined in the program that it has to be one or the other. We're also looking at the demand and the needs of where in the state that they're asking for it. Sometimes I'll consider if it's an 830G project where if you're in lower Fairfield County, the rents are already 50 to 60% below market just to qualify under 830G. So again, if we're helping get that deal built, which is already providing 30% of the units as affordable to workforce housing levels, I may take a lesser discount on the units I'm restricting, because I'm going to restrict some additional units. I'm not going to just count what they're getting under 830G. I'm going to ask for additional units, and I'll weigh the cost benefit of that. But generally, I'm trying to target around a 15% weighted average discount on a 2% loan. And the effective cost, what's important is, sometimes you hear 1%, 3%, 2%, cheap money. Well, it is cheap money, we know that, but it's also the realization is to the developer, it's not just the interest rate they're paying, they're also paying, they're taking less cash flow, they're reducing their rent. So when I tell them about the program, I factor in this is going to be the loss of rent that you're likely going to experience for those restricted units, add that to the interest cost, so your effective cost might be more like 5.5%. It depends on each deal. So let's be transparent about it, realize what your costs are. But if I'm saving you from putting more equity into the deal, and I'm filling a gap between where the bank is on the primary loan, then that cost is really cheap equity. and it's something that, for a lot of developers, it makes sense to consider.
But I would think, to answer kind of your question, I think the charts that Vin and I can send over to you, you got kind of an idea of where there are differences at various AMI levels in terms of rents. And
I was trying to get a ballpark, just what this translates to in terms of real dollars. So in Rocky Hill, where we're seeing on new construction, rents up like $2,600 a month or so market.
Right.
So 15% would be saving people $400 or so a month.
Right. Yep. And there's a picture of Kelson Row, or at least the renderings. That was 232 units, so there'll be 42 units that will be in the workforce housing range between the 80s and the 100%. As just another example, I just kept a couple more. Steel Point Harbor in Bridgeport, you may or may not have heard of that project. That is a project that would not have been able to be built without us coming in and filling a gap. And that's creating a whole new neighborhood in Bridgeport on the water, which I think will prove to be very valuable over time. Of the 420 units, 160 of those will be affordable to people making between 80 and 100% area median income on a household basis.
Are certain cities not subject to AMI?
No, everybody has an AMI.
Okay.
What I will tell you is that it's not a, you'll see in the calculator, I call it the calculator, you drop down box by town and you pull it up. Basically, it's county information from
Right.
HUD. But because that's the only reliable source of annual income that we can count on, we can't be as detailed as we'd love. We'd love if every town had the ability to give us that AMI information, and we could be very, very targeted and understand what your AMI is for Rocky Hill versus Berlin, or, but we can't, but this is the best we can do. And that's why the 60 to 120, 60 is a little bit low for workforce housing. If you look up the definition, usually it's 80 to 120, but the 60 gives us a little bit more latitude to include some units and make sure that we can get more projects in the program. And that last one. And then the last one is just a small project in Haddam, 44 units. We restricted, in this case, there was no inclusionary zoning, so we restricted 20%, 9 units. Typically, we're trying to do 50 units or more as a project and restrict a minimum of 10 units per project to sort of help it along.
And I think, one of the reasons for the pictures, I want to kind of give you a sense as to, this isn't the kind of concrete block, nondescript housing developments that you might have seen 50, 60, 70 years ago, right? These are private developers building affordable housing that is of high quality, energy efficient, and places that I think most people would be very proud to live. And so just want to kind of convey that, because I think there is kind of a misperception out there about what affordable housing is these days.
Well, by the way, on home buying, what is, if somebody uses your CHFA program, is that considered an affordable housing unit in this town?
It is under 830G. It is.
So your time to own program is knocking it out of the park right now, and there's a lot of people utilizing that in town. I'm familiar with it, so that would contribute to our. And how does a town recognize that? Like,
I don't know how it works with the Department of Housing. We don't get into, we don't administer kind of or we're not in charge of the 830G statute and how towns' affordable housing metrics are met. So I couldn't tell you in any great detail on that front, but I perhaps can get back to you with a little bit.
No, I'm in mortgages, so that would contribute, like, if anybody buys a home in town that uses CHFA, whether the time to own program or regular CHFA, wow.
It says, the statute says CHFA mortgages are.
Well, the home mortgage side was a little dormant for about 5 to 7 years there. With time to own, you guys have really put yourself back on the map, including rate-wise, because rate-wise, you really weren't below market, but now I can attest you are.
And for folks who don't know, Time to Own is a down payment program that we offer. It's partnered with a CHFA mortgage, and essentially you can get, depending on where you're buying a house, you can get up to $25,000 to $50,000 to go towards down payment and closing costs, and that loan it's a forgivable loan. So if you stay in your house for 10 years, you don't have to pay it back, and so it is kind of very generous, and it's getting,
And there's no payment made during that 10-year payment. Yeah, it's a very good program, and that's funded by the state. The The
Yes, that
state,
is-
not by CHFA.
You got it. So whereas we are not found in the state budget from an operations side, there are some programs that we run on behalf of the state in time to
I think you've had 90 million infusion, something like that from the
something like,
state.
it's
Yeah.
the total's more than that. I don't know what's kind
Yeah.
of, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head
No,
exactly how much thus far, but
Yeah.
yes, it's a robust program that is really,
Mm-hmm.
I think, very popular.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to mention about the Bill for CT program is the restrictions are, the terms that we do is we're we're interest only during construction, much like the senior lender. The borrower puts their equity in first. Our funds will go in second because they're cheaper. The senior lender will actually be the participating lender. This is where the private side comes in, where we have a number of banks that have signed on to be on the program with us. So what we do is we fund the money into an account that they can hold and control, and they will disperse those funds much like they would disperse their own construction funds. And then once ours are exhausted, they then disperse theirs to finish the construction out. The restrictions are going to be in place for the longer of 6 years from C of O, or as long as the loan is outstanding. The loan is for 20-year term with a 40-year amortization. So we don't foresee anybody rushing to pay us off
No,
early.
not at
So that would
1%.
allow those restrictions that you are so important to the town to remain on the books as long as that loan's outstanding. But after 6 years, they could pay us off if they refinance their first mortgage. They could pay us off. The restrictions would go away. The restrictions that we impose, obviously not the ones that you impose under inclusionary zoning, and then they could bring those rents to market. So again, the twofold goal of the program was to get more units built and also to get some restrictions as a result of that. Hopefully that will extend over time.
But zoning procedures, we could keep them to the number or percentage of units that are affordable anyway. So that would be built into their,
Anything that you've approved
We've
under
ap-
zoning.
right. They
that's
can't change
different,
that, but they can
10%.
change, yeah, okay.
What I did with the Kelson Row is I gave them credit for the 10% that you were
Required,
requiring.
yep.
And then I required another 10% that I restricted. That got us to the minimum 20%. And then my restrictions I'll monitor, your restrictions you monitor, and the program, if they were to pay off our loan after 6
They
years.
could possibly go
My
away,
restrictions
yeah.
would go away, yours
Right.
would be in place.
So I have a question. It's a bit outside of your primary expertise, but something you brought, well, you must have picked up on. So aside from financing and other soft costs, been any recent lessons or wisdom about how to build affordable housing economically? For example, maybe increased use of prefab, for
Sure,
example. I've been
sure.
hearing more about that, but are there other things like that, lessons learned about, aside from saving on borrowing, but the actual expense of building stuff? What's the current wisdom on
I
that?
would say the current wisdom is there's always more to learn. I would say if you watch 60
That's
Minutes.
not a satisfying answer.
I know. But I'm saying that if you watch like 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago, you saw prefab and
3D
3D printing and how to build, right? So there's a lot of companies and businesses out there trying to figure out ways. Vessel, who I know you guys have heard about, is someone who's out there with prefab and is busy. They just completed their first project in New London. I know they have a project on Henkel Way that they're looking to do here in Rocky Hill and a number of other communities around the state. That's someone that we're actively talking with, trying to understand their product. As soon as they have power to their project in New London, we will be touring that. Again, we're always trying to find ways to reduce those costs and still provide what we need because we realize the funds will go further. The tax credit money will go further if we can reduce the cost and get more developments built with the funds that we get through the tax credit program. So I know it's not the answer you want to hear in regards to there's a definite, but I think what I will tell you, and I was in the private sector for 30 years financing commercial real estate with banks and agency lenders, is that it's clear to me that in talking just in my brief time at CHFA and with Department of Housing, this is sort of the hottest button, is how do we get the cost down and how do we figure out ways to make it cheaper. And that's not a Connecticut problem, that's a national problem in housing in general, never let alone lower income and affordable housing.
Well, by the way, your underwriting of those projects is important too. Like, you're going to make sure they're not putting up less than structurally sound housing.
Right, exactly. So
Right,
there's
yeah,
there's the requirements of what's sound And certainly the tax
Right.
credit program has very strong regulations on that, as well as everybody's building codes. The building codes have gotten worlds better
Well,
over the last
but,
few
yeah,
decades.
by definition, there's safety there, too.
And we have technical service people who kind of deal with all of that as well. And I think, one of the challenges to building affordable housing is that it's kind of, we often refer to it as lasagna financing, is that you need various sources to make it happen. And so that's always the challenge too. So if there's a way to kind of cut down, this would be for policymakers, right, to cut down on some of the complexity of these, the way these deals have to come together, that would be helpful too, I think, in terms of bringing down the cost. But that's really tough because it's a mix of private, public partnership financing and the like that becomes a challenge to try to build some of these things.
Okay. Any other questions? Great.
Great.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
this evening.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, we've tabled item C, so we'll move, mayor's report. There is no mayor's report tonight, so we'll move to the town manager's report.
Okay, just a few items. Just to give the council a view of some internal things we're working on. Starting next month at the August 15th meeting, I will be implementing a monthly report to be submitted to me from the different departments to give the council and myself an idea of what activities we're working on. And also, I'll be meeting monthly, maybe every other month, depending on the department and who it might be and what they're doing, to make sure that each department is working towards the budget, working toward the goals that we identified in the budget, and measuring against some of the performance measures that we've implemented. So that will be on a monthly basis, but in addition to that, I'll be giving you departmental reports so you know what's going on a little bit more than you do now. Also, we're updating some various town policies. I know HR is working on updating the personnel rules, the ADA, and drug and alcohol policies, and we'll be working on vehicle use policies. We started that, doing some research, so we'll be reviewing that also. I've appointed Mike Murphy as library director finally. You all know Mike. He's been with the town for like 20 years, I think. Some strategic initiatives. I'll be calling, it's kind of like a somewhere like kind of mini retreat kind of thing, but we're not going anywhere, so don't worry. A workshop or a planning session, probably early fall with key managers and their directors and myself to discuss the relationships between their operations as well as their activities against those strategic initiatives that we have in the budget that you all voted on, and as well as priorities and issues, items that are also in the budget to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and also making sure that those initiatives are actually valid at this point. And if things need to be changed, we're working, maybe tweaking that, bringing those suggestions back to the council during the budget process. A little more exciting things, Kelson Row. Report from the building department, 8 buildings are under construction, and they're doing, of course, their daily ongoing inspections, and also the drainage infrastructure that needed to be installed is being installed by Kelson Row, funded by Kelson Row. So the flooding issue will no longer be an issue. Throughout this headline, cannabis, it's a grabber for interest. Planning and Zoning Commission revised the zoning regulations to add licensed adult recreational use, retail use in the regional commercial zone, which is that area down by Walmart, exit 24 area. So they will probably be looking at an application if they haven't already received one for a location down in that area.
For what, a dispensary?
For a retail store dispensary, yeah, recreational use. in the former Tapestry Rose, the railroad depot down on Meadow Road. Planning and Zoning Commission approved the conversion of that building from the planned and approved restaurant use to 2 residential units. That property has been, has had some issues trying to find a restaurant user, primarily due to the inadequate parking in that location. Line striping, road line striping. They were completed townwide in June, and their symbols and stop bars on the west side of town were also completed. And Ferry Park and the fire company 2 parking lots were also striped and completed. As you all know, they're doing some work up on France and Fox. We're on area right now. Some capital improvement projects. These all come from the Community Development Office. Community Development Director is working with CROG regarding to the Elm Street and Century Hills Phase 1 sidewalks. We received a grant for Phase 1, a steep grant, quite a while ago. However, the state is constantly requesting changes to the plan, so that's what we're doing. That's what CROG is doing under the DOT review. The same for Phase 2 of that project, which is being funded by LOTSIP. Same issue. DOT keeps reviewing the plans, making changes, and our consultant has to keep making changes, so it's a snowball effect. And again, the same with Glastonbury Avenue. That's funded with a LOTSIP grant, the sidewalks in Glastonbury Avenue. They're all at 60% design phase. However, DOT is still looking at revisions. So things are moving, but they're moving slowly. That's going to be expected. I think I have an update from Craig, Parks and Rec. Again, we have markets scheduled for January 23rd. I'm sorry, January 23rd.
It's a little cold.
July 23rd, July 30th, August 6th, and August 18th. August 13th. August 6th is the National Night Out. That's the big celebration that is really well attended. And one more item just in this afternoon from Steve Sopelak, Community Development Director, regarding the realignment of the I-91 exit ramps at exit 24. If you recall, we had quite a bit of discussions over the years about getting rid of those big dog legs and teeing up that intersection. Apparently, the state is seeking some funding through the TIP process for preliminary design to eliminate those dog legs and get that ramp teed up. That would also help some development potential right at that intersection. You know, there was a hotel approved almost a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, along with a restaurant. There were some issues with that dog leg and the taking rights of the highway. So this may help that project move forward, or another project come in and establish itself there. And that is all I have.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
That was quick.
So moved?
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.